Hello everybody, my name is Brooklyn, otherwise known as TheDramaticOtaku, and welcome to my Uzumaki review of the 2024 anime Uzumaki, based on the manga by Junji Ito of the same name. Now, today we'll be reviewing Uzumaki, the anime adaptation of the critically acclaimed manga of the same name from the mind of Junji Ito. Now, I am no stranger to Junji Ito's works, the anime adaptations of the past as well, and I have read Uzumaki in the past about 2 or 3 years ago now. And I have been waiting for this anime since 2022. Now, as of recording, I have watched the entire series, but the format of this review is me recording my reaction after every single episode, and I'm very glad I did because of the very obvious elephant in the room, the animation quality. I want to get this out of the way because I am almost certain that is something you want to see come out of this video. Now, I am not going to claim I know why there is such a difference between the first episode and the rest of the series. I've heard so many different rumors as to why, and I really can't get a clear and concise answer. Apparently, there have been animators talking on Twitter, but I do not have a Twitter account, and annoyingly, Elon Musk has made it just impossible to see tweets if you don't have a Twitter account. So, I can't get a clear and concise answer. I've heard rumors from studio changes to an animation team change to the studio pulling funding from the series. I genuinely do not know why that has happened, and I'm not going to act like I do. I'm going to assume and infer, but I do not know. You have to know that going in. This is a review. This is not an extensive analysis into why Uzumaki has become such a shitstorm of a spiral. Long story short, I am disappointed in this series. It went from amazing to what the fuck to okay to are you actually fucking joking. I also purposely did not look at any public perception until after episode 3 so I could develop my own opinion on the series. Pretty much after episode 3 I did, but I became a little frustrated as always. Why do I always look at anime Reddits and comments? It just pisses me off. That set aside, without further ado, let's just jump into my opinions of each episode after they had aired. Uzumaki Part 1. So, to kick off the Uzumaki anime, I can definitely say as someone who has read the manga, this series is currently living up to expectations. That being, we've waited a long fucking time for this anime to come out. It better be fucking good. Or at least better than Junji Ito, the Junji Ito collection and Maniac. And I can comfortably say that has succeeded thus far. The first episode encapsulates essentially 3 main chapters of the series and sets up one for the next episode. This being Chapter 1 and 2, the Spiral Obsession Part 1 and 2, though the second part of the Spiral Obsession is not yet complete, with the mother not yet stabbing herself, as well as Chapter 3, The Scar. The chapter, however, being set up is Chapter 8, The Snail, skipping past a solid 5 chapters at the moment. And with how things are going, I am assuming The Snail, Medusa, as well as the end of Spiral Obsession Part 2 will all be in episode 2. Something that really caught me off guard with the first episode is how easily they combined each chapter and how 2 stories would be happening at once while they set up future stories. Maybe because other Junji Ito adaptations have been very episodic in nature and in vignettes, such as their original source material, my brain kind of just expects full stops when it comes to Junji Ito anime adaptations at this point, as well as like with the original format of the manga, expecting it to stop and start and for characters in one story not to interact in the next. And as Uzumaki is a long form story, it is completely understandable that they did it in this way. But I just couldn't help think in my head, but Asami met Kiri after the male protagonist's dads die.
They don't intersect at all!
This being sort of amplified by the fact that I haven't read Uzumaki in a hot minute, so I actually forgot the order of chapters other than the very first two. In terms of the fear factor of episode 1, the latter half of the episode dominates over the first half. As someone who has, as I said, read Uzumaki and has gotten used to that specific horror style, the dad going crazy in the animation really made no difference to me and had really no impact. And in where I watched it, I watched the English dub, mainly because Uzumaki's not airing in Australia, so I had to find other methods of watching it that involved a VPN. So I was restricted to the English dub, and the voice actor for the father in the English dub was really, really good. His voice was probably the most unsettling thing about the first half of the episode, as well as the zoom in on his face when he's rambling to Kiri's dad about pottery and spirals. This, as well as the CG models having a very Uncanny Valley-esque walk, which made me severely uncomfortable because everyone has a really weird gait and was walking very slowly and awkwardly and very unhuman-like. However, when it comes to the second half of the episode, a lot really amps up the creep factor and the horror factor. For one, there are these really big moments of silence in calm moments, and I don't mean between characters, I mean in the soundtrack. Characters will be talking and nothing is happening behind them. The sound mostly comes in around moments where there is stress-inducing horror, like Asami succumbing to the spiral, or the mother starting to go crazy. And I think the mother starting to go crazy in the beginning of chapter 2 is where the creep factor really starts to come in story-wise. Between her screams being genuinely disturbing and her cutting off her fingertips, which actually gave me a full body reaction when that happened, I think this is where the series gets its positive attention from. My top 3 moments in terms of horror for the first episode, the top spot has to go to the mother cutting off her fingertips, followed by the visual of Asami devouring the student she manipulated. I can comfortably say Vor makes me viscerally uncomfortable. And the wriggling of her body as she gets torn apart by the spiral and all that sort of stuff. Hate it. Absolutely fucking hate it. And the third moment of horror for me is realizing they were setting up the snail chapter 8. So early on in the series as well, me having the entire chapter flash through my mind as I saw the bully character and suddenly started to feel ill, as we're going to have to live through that in anime form. I think I will throw up. My critiques of this episode is that some of the voice lines sounded out of place. There are moments where Kiri is outside visually and sounds like she's in a sound booth. Again, the uncanny CG models for the walking, I've really, really hated their movement so fucking much, but completely understand that it is probably for the best to have these models in the anime, so I will look past it. And also at times there are moments where there is just so much detail that it's really hard to focus on one spot. This, particularly for me, comes in the form at the very start of the episode when the father is obsessing with spirals and has all this spiral shit behind him. And they did try to fix this by creating a better field of depth with CG models and shading and all that sort of shit. There's still just a lot of detail, and it does tend to get a little lost in the actual manga itself. However, just with all the elements going on in the anime and the fact that it's all moving as well, just made it that much more difficult to focus at certain points where there is a lot visually going on. And especially when you are recreating the detail of Junji Ito and making it move, it can be pretty difficult, so I will give them that. Also, I noticed that at the moment, Kiri's little brother is missing. He is in chapter 1, as he is seen as a side character when Kiri is talking about her friend's father. I really fucking can't remember his name at the moment, but he's not there at the moment, which is really, really weird, because he is actually a pretty important character to the story, as especially after the snail, he becomes a very much more important character, especially to Kiri. So I don't know why he's not there yet. If they try and erase him, I will actually kind of be sad. Because I don't know what they're gonna do to replace him. In terms of the next episode, my predictions, that sort of stuff, I am also worried with the snail being set up this early, with it possibly being in the next episode, what order the chapters are going to be in, and what chapters will be cut from Uzumaki. Now, there are definitely chapters that can be cut that really don't need to be there because they're just more oddities than things that actually progress the plot. I'm just concerned as to what ones are going to be missing, especially seeing as there are characters who are supposed to be there who aren't there yet as well. In the end, some extra notes. I found Kiri's little thing where she's trying to do the separate swirly eye thing when she's just blinking. I found that very cute. Is Asami Christina V? Because it fucking sounds like it. And let's move on to episode 2. Right, okay, so that was bit of a clusterfuck. Where episode 1 started off right and worked through 3 chapters, not finishing one, and setting up a 4th chapter, episode 2 started and completed 5 whole chapters. 5. And then continued chapter 2, which had been started in the previous episode. So much fucking happened in this episode, and while there were standout moments, they did not get to settle or really sit in with the viewer because something else was always happening. A lot was happening. And this is just plot-wise. This isn't even animation-wise yet. We will talk about the fucking animation, right? I think episode 2 compared to episode 1, such a drop-off in quality, both story-wise and animation-wise. I really think, plot-wise, the downfall of this episode was running the snail and Medusa in tandem with each other. These two are major chapters of Uzumaki, and I feel like they should have been executed with one at the start of the episode and the other at the end, similar to how chapter 1 took up a majority of the first part of the first episode, and Scar, which is chapter 3, took up the majority of the end of the episode. Now, did they technically run in tandem to each other? Yes. However, their climaxes were not at the same time whatsoever, whereas Medusa and the snails kind of were. And this especially worked in episode 1's favor, mainly because they were both in different settings. I think the reason why the snail and Medusa will run at the same time is because they're essentially in the exact same setting, but why they wouldn't just make it different days really confuses me. Now, did all the chapters that were included in episode 2 need to be in Uzumaki? I would argue the relevance of Jack in a Box, but again, I haven't really read Uzumaki in a hot minute, but I would say all of the chapters except for Jack in the Box needed to be included in Uzumaki, absolutely. This being because Twisted Souls introduces the poorhouses and body twisting, the snail introduces snail transformation, Medusa is more character relevant to Kyrie than anything. Also, I thought in the first episode they called her Kiri, and now they're calling her Kyrie, so I don't know if that was me fucking shit up, but they called her Kyrie in the second episode. I swear to God they called her Kiri in the first one. And Medusa being important to Uzumaki is also important because it's like one of the most well-known chapters outside of the Scar, and obviously the first chapter. And then of course is the Black Lighthouse, which is a turning point in the actual series itself, with the town truly spiraling into madness after this point. Now, at the moment, there has only been one chapter from the entirety of Uzumaki that has been cut, and that is chapter 4, The Firing Effect, which involves the lake that the dad's ashes fell into. in episode 1, but to my knowledge, I think the water hole is actually important to the rest of the story. I don't know. No, yes it is, because that is the center of the town. So why they haven't specified the pond yet, because that is important to the very end of the story, because that is again the center of the town, so the center of the spiral. I don't know why. Because that's what the firing effect highlights. It affects the watering hole because that's where the dad gets water for his pottery, which causes everything to explode. Well, by the end, his workshop has fucking exploded from memory. So that chapter was cut. They could probably, in an offhand comment, mention the water, but they haven't yet. Other than showing the dad's ashes falling into it in episode 1. The little brother has finally appeared. The little brother of Kiri. It felt very cheap and quick to just suddenly introduce him in this episode and not the prior one, because he, as a character, is in prior chapters, because he's sort of always peering around the corner and stuff like that, and like very interested in what Kyrie is doing. Why he was just suddenly appearing when both of Kyrie's parents were in the previous episode as well, I don't know why. So those are story-wise. Next is artistically. What happened? Actually, what happened? Physical and artistic quality of the episode. Oh, I really felt a change here. It was quite literally my first note from the episode. What happened to the animation? There could be some stuff on my end. The streaming service I was using, as well as my own internet speed, definitely could have affected my perception. However, I know the difference between embedded quality difference in the animation and blur induced by streaming services. And what I was seeing was definitely an animation difference. Personally, the best moment to actually highlight the physical differences in animation has to be at the end of that episode in the Black Lighthouse. This is the moment where Kyrie and her brother are running down the spiral staircase of the lighthouse because the light is about to hit them. First, we get a close-up of Kyrie's brother, and he looks stressed. It's very blank expressions going on. The literal next shot we are seeing is a close-up of Kyrie, and in comparison, right? So Kyrie's brother is just like a block. You can tell he's stressed, but it's a block. Dark hair in just like stuck together. His face is stressed. Maybe one or two sweat drops. Nothing too detailed. Kyrie is really detailed in comparison. You have her hair splayed in different ways. Her hair is splaying everywhere. There's lots of little small details. It looks like each and every individual strand was hand painted, all that sort of stuff. They're splaying away from her face. She's got sweat dripping from her forehead. She is visibly terrified as compared to Kyrie's brother, who is stressed. And that is literally one frame, the next frame. Then is the movement of characters again. Now, I know in the last segment, I chucked the walking up to being very eerie because of the models. But this episode, they just straight up look out of place. For example, when characters moving from the background to the foreground or vice versa, it looks like they are a rotoscoped video on a still image.
Let's go.
Whereas, like, the previous episode, they would have actually looked like they were fucking walking into the background. And it doesn't help when characters are blurred at a distance when they're, like, trying to blend them into the background, because the backgrounds are very detailed, so blurring the characters doesn't do anything, but just make you realize they're blurring the characters to try and hide them in the background. Especially when they suddenly become clear in the foreground. It feels like we're playing with Gaussian blur on Procreate. It's now less eerie in terms of animation and movement, and more noticeable. And speaking about the models, the hair for Medusa, or rather, the entire story of Medusa, I felt this is where the quality really dropped off significantly. Plot-wise, we were rapidly switching between moments from the two stories, not letting a moment from one story sit with us before the next moment started. And with the concept and imagery of both, especially the snail, these two stories should not have been interconnected, because ironically, Medusa does not get the center of attention in that battle. The reason the snail is my most disliked story in Uzumaki, and the one I cared about adapting the most, is because of how gross, uncomfortable, and upsetting it is. Two kids get turned into giant snails, one of the kids being bullied by the other. In the end, their humanity gets stripped from them as they both become snails and behave like snails, mating like snails, and laying eggs like snails. It is grotesquely uncomfortable and sad, especially as one of the kids' parents do not believe their son is a snail and think that he is a missing person. The visual imagery of the snail in this episode is very reflective of the actual story, and on more than one occasion made me physically recoil because of how well it was actually done. But I didn't get to relish in that disgust because we suddenly were supposed to pay attention to Medusa, which was a real shame because I felt that Medusa, in terms of artistically and plot-wise, was handled as if it had been shoved into the Junji Ito collection. So the hair for Medusa is supposed to be alive. I understand CG was used for the sheer amount of detail in the hair alone, but since it was, two things occurred. That thing that I mentioned in the previous segment, there is so much detail that you can't focus thing that I mentioned, became extremely prevalent here, with the visuals in the hair becoming or appearing stupidly rigid, and you can't actually make out the spirals in the hair. It looks more like tree branches than it does hair spiraling into these big balls of spirals, you know? In moments where the hair is animated in 2D animation, it works. It works very well. But the CG model just completely falls flat. And the fight, the girl's dark hair looks straight out of the Junji Ito collection, as the black hair just looks like a mass on her head. Maybe a color change could have been done, making her hair like a dark grey instead of black, but generally it just looked really messy. And again, switching between the snail and this just fully took me out of the fight because something more disgusting was happening with the snail as compared to this fight, which really, I didn't want to pay attention to the fight at all. I just wanted to pay attention to snail because at the same time that these guys are fighting, the other two were fucking, okay? My brain is trying to comprehend what's happening over here, and I'm supposed to pay attention to what's happening over here, and it's far less memorable over here than it is over here. The best story of the entire set of 5 stories in this episode was The Lighthouse, solely because it could be condensed and fit well into the episode, especially in the end of said episode. I would have liked more separation between the chapter Medusa and the snail, because the snail had some really fantastically disgusting moments as well, and as much as I felt like Jack in the Box was added for the sake of justifying jump scares, Yamaguchi's body getting twisted around the wheel is wonderfully gory, and I can admit I did get spooked by the Jack in the Box jump scare at the very end of the episode. I'm not too hopeful on the next episode, solely based off of this one, which is really sad because the first episode was absolutely fan-fucking-tastic. My current predictions story-wise for the next episode is that chapter 2 will finally end as Kyrie and her brother will end up in the hospital for the next couple of chapters in the next episode due to them getting hurt by the black lighthouse. And because she'll be in hospital, I reckon that is when the mother of her boyfriend will die. I keep forgetting his fucking name. We're gonna talk about Uzumaki, episode 3, like the gamer guys, gamers, yeah, you know, those commentary YouTubers. We're gonna try and do that. And it's gonna sound like the incoherent ramblings of a crazy person, because what was that? First of all, I will say the animation quality is better than it was in episode 2 at the very least, but at the fault of the actual story and plotline, because other than first of all, I was very much correct with the mother dying in this episode. I am fully of the belief that how the showrunners have handled like all of the stuff with Soichi and his mother, and the father dying, all that sort of stuff was really well done. I honestly, genuinely, highlight of every episode that I have like watched thus far. You know, the only 3 episodes of 4 that are coming out. The other chapters and stuff. So we have the mosquito, you have the one with the baby fetuses things. I can't remember if that is still the mosquito or not. I think it is a runoff chapter of that. And we also, for some fuck off reason, got chapter 4. First of all, I was fully correct with my assumption of the water from chapter 4 being very important to the plot, because it is. And like you also get the cyclone and stuff like that. What I found really is that stories didn't start properly. The exposition wasn't really there. And in theory, yeah, that should have worked, but it didn't, because you didn't know what was happening half the time. This mainly I have the critique for is chapter 4, because I appreciate that it didn't take up space in like the whole hospital arc thing, and the whole hospital arc, I get why, like, it was all put in one section, and it does benefit with that, unlike with the snail and Medusa. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know, it's the whole mosquito thing. While the imagery, I guess, could be, like, spooky and stuff like that, maybe it's because I'm just very numb to Junji Ito at the moment, but I was more scared, once again, by the mother in all of this, and her shoving scissors in her ears. Again, the way they handled the mother, the father, Shoichi, all that sort of stuff, so good. Fantastic, wonderful. Really wish they had that energy with some of the other stories. One of the images that does stick in my mind still is the cousin being like re-sewn up after, you know, having birth and having the baby be put back in her stomach. But it's just like, I don't know. Yeah, it sticks on your head, but that's because it's stuck in your head the first time in the manga. Okay, so condensing that clusterfuck of mindless thought noise for a second. While I appreciate the horrific imagery in the hospital, the stories feel like they start in the middle of the story rather than having a very clean setup from the beginning. I found chapter 4's inclusion here as an afterthought, as showrunners realized the lake was actually important, and as it was set up in chapter 4, was needed for the final episode. So chapter 4's inclusion in episode 3 really feels strange. The most horrific part of the episode for me was once again Shuichi's mother, and while the imagery of Kiri's cousin having her child sewn back into her was definitely terrifying, because I've read it in the manga, it was to a lesser effect to me, while still being very memorable. But I can't tell if it's memorable because I've seen said imagery in the manga, or if it's because I saw it be animated. Animation quality felt slightly better than episode 2, but not episode 1 quality whatsoever. And it's so upsetting seeing how long this has been delayed only for this to come from the show. I'm very worried on how the story is going to end in episode 4. Seeing as this is the last episode, I'm actually going to film myself reacting to it and then cut up the bits that are, I don't know, the best. So, if there are any good bits. Okay. New episode. Final episode. Give me episode 4. It sort of looks completely different than the last couple of episodes. What's happening? Wait. Something's going on here. Why is there 2 of him? Why is there actually 2 of him? What the fuck's going on? I don't... What? Where the fuck did the father come from? Oh god, the sound is not matching the imagery. Oh, okay, the sound is not matching up to the imagery on screen, and it's actually pissing me off. What is this sequence? Kiri's face keeps changing. The fact that things slow down when the thingies come across is really annoying. As if it didn't, like, render properly. The cut to people eating, I feel like could have been done a little bit better. The thing where Kiri gets really detailed and then everything going really simple again keeps happening. Where did Minsuo go? Hold on. What the fuck was that? Go back 10 seconds. Why did she look like a comic book character? What is that? No, she looks completely different. The fact that it goes from ear to ear is pretty okay. The animation feels like it's constantly changing. The fact that she keeps switching between detailed and not detailed is really annoying. They don't make full movements. Stop, hold on. No. What the fuck was that? What was that? What the fucking person? What the fuck was that? I'm sorry, who the fuck is that? Who is that? Really, really detailed. She just fucking disappeared for half a second. Ugh. Okay, the animation changes are now in the same scene and same shot. Okay, it's trying to be really, really detailed for a lot of it. And, yeah, majority of it is, like, really, really detailed, right? At this point. But then you have parts that are very simplistic. There is more at the end of this. Why is there more at the end of this? Why was there an after credit scene? I guess it's to insinuate that it keeps happening, but... So, as you can tell, not the fucking biggest fan of episode 4. I was actually quite devastated with what happened with episode 4, solely because the animation errors and the constant changing of fucking animation styles in episode 4 really fucking took me out of the story. Now, not only was I trying to formulate if, like, that point in the story was actually, like, supposed to happen that early on, like after the cyclones and all that sort of stuff. Vaguely, yes, it does, but I feel like a lot was cut out. Obviously to fit so many chapters, like the whole latter half of Uzumaki into an episode, a lot had to be cut out. But I really couldn't pay attention to it solely because of the animation. Now, you would have seen in the previous part how many times I sort of pointed out and go, what the fuck is this? Why is this happening? What's going on here? And animation errors do happen in TV shows. That's completely normal, but not to the fucking extent of what happened. We had characters who look like they had been ripped out of like Archer, characters who look like they were in a completely different fucking anime. Kiri's face changed like 4 times in one scene, so not happy at all. Also for the fact of the tornadoes, sounds were not connected to what was happening on the screen. They were actually like behind on timing, which I get, like it's supposed to be like blurry and stuff, but it just wasn't on. With everything else, I couldn't look past it. So with that, the slow-mo happening, the, voices not matching up to mouth flaps when they're in the tornadoes, did not like it. Really fucking annoyed. It is probably the worst the animation has been out of the entire series, and that's not because some of the animation was really shit and some was really good. It was because it kept changing. Like, clearly, animators had actually worked on solid parts of episode 4, but the fucking studio did not give them enough time to actually work on it properly, or it was bounced around between people way too much because there was such a lack of consistency. You had shots where Kiri looked like she was a basic sketch and others where she was super fucking detailed. The exact same thing that happened in episode 2, where I pointed out that Kiri was super detailed and then her brother was not detailed at all. Not to mention, her brother looked so strange for half of the episode because he was suddenly detailed when we'd seen nothing of him but like a facade half the fucking series. So I'm fucking devastated at what has happened to Uzumaki. Which leads me on to my entire opinion of the series. If you're going to watch Uzumaki, watch episode 1 and only episode 1, because oh my god, I waited 2 years for what the fuck we got. I do not blame the animators for this. I do not blame the voice actors, any of the creatives involved. I solely blame the studio, because in times like this, where the animation has gone to shit, where there's so many inconsistencies, it's never on the animators' fault, it is always on the studio's fault for cutting funding, rushing deadlines, that sort of stuff. And that is what I think has actually happened. That they worked on the first episode and then they've rushed the deadlines for all the rest of them because they finished episode 1. So I am really upset with that, because episode 1 was fantastic, and you can see shots in other episodes where it looks like they were trying to continue that animation style, and that's where you get these really detailed scenes, and they just didn't fucking do it because assumedly they ran out of time. And it's like, you delayed this for 2 years. How the fuck did you run out of time? And I get that they were stuck in trying to get this produced in production hell. But still, I'm just so incredibly frustrated with this series, especially since episode 1 was genuinely really good. I really liked it. Personally, I think the most horror comes from threads of episode 1. This being the mother. Shoichi's mother. Shoichi, I couldn't actually fucking tell. What is his name? Shuichi. His name is Shuichi. Okay, so all of the threads connected to Shuichi I thought was really good. I thought they were horrific. But everything else fell completely flat on its face, and I'm really upset by that. So plot and story took a sidestep in the last 2 episodes, which is so fucking frustrating, because I felt there was really good imagery in episode 3, even though yes, it was not consistent, and episode 4 was actually just a clusterfuck. So I very incredibly disappointed with Uzumaki. Do I think that the animation is on par with, say, Maniac or the Junji Ito collection? As of episode 2 onwards, yes. So if you want to experience Uzumaki in anime form, just watch episode 1. That is it. That is my opinion. Because episode 1 set up this series so fucking well, only to spiral into mediocrity and disappointment. As someone who loves Junji Ito, who has been waiting for this series for 2 years, I am incredibly disappointed. Again, I do not blame the animators. I do not blame the voice actors. I blame the studio itself. And whatever corporate entity forced this series to be published, despite the fact that it is not ready at all. It definitely was not ready, especially episode 4. I really think the one that was the most undercooked, that needed to be worked on the most, was episode 4. Animation errors, to audio errors, to fucking differences in animations that really could not keep me hooked on the series. Like, you saw from my previous reviews of episodes 1 through 3, I kept track of what chapters were going on in the actual series itself. I did not do that for episode 4 because I could not focus on the actual plotline for episode 4. That is all to say that for Uzumaki, the anime, I unfortunately have to give it like a 6 out of 10. And those 6 points are just for episode 1. I would give episode 1 a 9 out of 10 because I thought it was fucking fantastic. If not a little, like, lost on the eyes because of how much detail there was. Episode 4, you're lost on the eyes because you don't know what the fuck you're looking at. Also, the end credit scene. Why was there an end credit scene? It was not needed. You had Kiri's voiceover say it was restarting, that potentially in the future it could start again. You had all of Shuichi's inferring that this has happened before, in a spiral, in the loop of time. You did not need an after credit scene of this shit happening again. It is inferred. That, I think, pisses me off the most, that there was an actual time and effort put into an after credits scene and not the actual series it fucking self. That pisses me off the most, especially since it's not needed. You have the inference. You have the voice actors actually fucking saying, hey, this could happen. Here is all this dialogue as to why this potentially happened in the first place. And then you did it again in an after credits scene. What's the point? Actually, what is the fucking point? I really shouldn't be getting this angry over a fucking anime, especially since it's Junji Ito, and 9 times out of 10, Junji Ito anime adaptations really disappoint. But I would have preferred the Junji Ito collection to what the fuck we got, except for episode 1. So, 6 out of 10 for Uzumaki as a whole, in terms of the anime, because there were good moments. There were horrific moments. I didn't think Shuichi's mother stabbing herself in the ear could get more horrific, and it did. And it was great, and that was fantastic. But what happened to the rest of the series? So, that is all for me today. I am wildly disappointed at the Uzumaki anime, especially since I have been waiting for it for 2 years. I really loved the first episode. If you're going to watch this anime, just watch the first episode. If you're in Australia and don't know how I watched it, VPN. That's all I need to say. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video to whatever extent you could. I'm really annoyed by how the anime has ended, And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Now, I know last week I said it was going to be whole SMP. I actually don't know if it's going to be whole SMP this week or if it's going to be my Halloween episode next week. Yes, this wasn't my Halloween episode. My Halloween episode is coming next week, and my earrings might be a little hint at to what is happening. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.